right, hey, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is NFL Football Talk. This is an Inside Sports production. As you know, the regular season is over. There's been tears of joy, tears of agony, close calls, and whatever else have you, but it is time for the NFL playoffs. So welcome to Football Talk. I'm your host, Charles E. Smith, Jr., and we're going to be taking you through this first wild card weekend. We're going to be talking about the coaching changes. We're going to be talking about the teams, who's going to win. Are there any upsets in the offing? We'll get into all of that, but before I get into that, let's go ahead and bring in my partner here. I only work with the best, as you know, because of my standards. I just have high standards. I only work with the best, none other than Chris Lardieri. Follow him on Twitter at ChrisLSports. Also online, chrislsports.blogspot.com. You can read some of his, as he calls them, I think he calls them sardonic musings about the NFL. But we'll go ahead and let him say that. Chris, what's happening?
How's it going, Charles? Thank you for the greatest introduction of 2014 to date. I appreciate it. I know you have high standards, but in the case of me, you must have a low bar if I can hurdle it.
Not really, man. So
I appreciate it.
So let me talk about what's happening. What's the latest in the world of Mr. Lardieri out there?
I think my Twitter account was going to melt down with all the sardonic musings, as you so aptly put. I was throwing out there during the late games on Sunday between Chiefs-Chargers and Packers-Bears. An unbelievable, I'd say, hour of football there, going back and forth. My remote control was working overtime. And were it not for yet another fine blown call by referees, your Steelers would have been in the playoffs. The impossible would have happened. So, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. I think it's essentially the first week of the playoffs there, week 17 became.
Yeah, that's true. And I think about the way that everything played out for this past weekend. It was, the teams that needed to win in the morning, who could have really killed the drama for the afternoon, both of them lost. That's the Ravens and the Dolphins. Then you have the Chargers playing against the Chiefs' backup. The Chiefs rested 20 of their 22 starters for that game. And the Chiefs still gave the Chargers all they could handle. And then the Chargers went on the field goal in overtime. But as it turns out, the Chiefs had missed that field goal near the end of regulation. But there should have been a call for too many men, the Chargers had 7 men on one side of the ball, which should have been a penalty. So the Chiefs should have gotten to kick from 5 yards closer, and they probably would have won the game, and that would have put the Steelers in. But hey, you know what? And then it culminates with the Sunday night game with Philadelphia and Dallas, with Kyle Orton doing, you had to say that was a great Tony Romo impression, all the way down to the crucial interception at the end of the game.
Yeah, absolutely, and very Romo-esque in just the way he threw the ball over the middle behind a receiver right into the arms of a linebacker, reminiscent of what he did against Denver early in the season. But, they hung in there. I'll give the Cowboys credit for that, and got as much as you could expect out of Orton, but too little, too late, and the Eagles go on to host a home game, and at least for 1 week, we can't blame Tony Romo for choking, can we?
No, they can't, but I'm sure that Tony Romo still felt some agony while his team was losing there. And what about Jerry Jones, which it puts him in an awkward situation because, and no one deserves an awkward situation as much as Jerry Jones does. However, you think if Romo had played and Romo had started and then they had lost the game, then he could go ahead and do whatever he wanted and maybe, send Jason Garrett packing if he wanted to. But now, when Kyle Orton had to start, that puts a whole different spin on that situation there with the team, the head coach, and everything else. And, of course, Dallas, 8-8 for the third straight season, another roller coaster ride of a 500 season.
Yeah, and he can't blame Jason Garrett, although there is plenty of blame to go around between he and Bill Callahan and Monty Kiffin on the defensive side. But, you know what, ultimately, Jerry Jones can point the finger at Romo or any number of his coaches, but he should really look in the mirror because the guy who's doing this decade's version of an Al Davis, owning a team and being a GM and surrounding himself with yes men, it's only hurting this team, and he really needs to see that. Look, I know every team in the league had injuries this year. Romo at the end of the year was a killer. They missed Sean Lee on the defensive side of the ball, but ultimately the guys that they're drafting aren't panning out.
Right.
And this many years of mediocrity in most cities would not be tolerated. Look at Tampa Bay, a city that's won one Super Bowl, doesn't have anywhere near the history of the Cowboys, and they cleaned house this week.
Yeah, that's true. And, looking at another team, which, we may have speculated on, that was the Detroit Lions. They sent Jim Schwartz packing. And with the Lions, I think that's the perfect situation for someone to step into, because you kind of got a ready-made team there. And I'm going to go ahead and let you answer this, but I have the perfect coach I think could step into Detroit and really maybe take them, if not to the promised land, really, really close to it next season. And then I think they're set up for then and beyond. But there's one coach in particular, coordinator right now, who I think would fit in that Detroit system. You want to go ahead and give it a shot at who that would be?
All right, so you gave me a hint. I was going to say John Gruden, but he's technically a broadcaster.
No.
So now that you said coordinator, I think we're thinking on the same page, and I would go with Ken Wisenhunt.
Exactly. Yes. Yes, sir. Oh.
We think alike. Not rehearsed, I swear.
So I think really, though, they get Wisenhunt in there in Detroit, and the Lions fans can go ahead and just start dreaming. I think so. Ken Wisenhunt, he's the perfect fit over there in Detroit.
I completely agree, because look at what he did with the Steelers and how he turned that offense around and opened up and let Big Ben throw more. They won a Super Bowl. He goes to Arizona. He gets Kurt Warner, who a lot of people, including my beloved Giants, thought was washed up. And the guy came within one play of winning a Super Bowl there. He fell on some hard times and salary cap issues and so on. But, if he had a halfway decent quarterback, who knows? Look, if he had Carson Palmer last year, he might actually still be in Arizona. Goes to San Diego. Everyone thought Phillip Rivers' career was done. Completely turned him around, and I think he's just the answer that Matthew Stafford needs.
Yeah, that's true. And, let's go ahead. We want to, of course, pick these playoff games here pretty soon, but we, of course, have got to talk about the situation. The Washington Redskins, as expected, they went ahead and gave Mike Shanahan the axe. Shanahan and RG3 just never could get on the same page there. What do you think there, that situation in D.C., is that a typical, this is another Redskins, Daniel Snyder, impossible situation for any coach who'd go in there?
I think so, because you really don't hear about a lot of the big names that are out there really raising their hand and throwing their hat into the ring for this job. And I think, to Snyder's credit, he's backed off a little. He's a little bit less Jerry Jones-like than he previously was. But ultimately, as the rumors have been coming out of the D.C. area, Robert Griffin III's his guy. He can do no wrong, and that's Dan Snyder's boy. He gave up ultimately a number of good draft picks for him, including one that will end up being the second pick this year that'll go to the Rams. How can you go into a situation like that? And look, Shanahan wasn't without fault, but if you look at that whole mess with the knee injury last year, it was a lose-lose situation. And the guy, I've never seen a guy, proverbially speaking, of course, so happy to be fired. So
right.
That's another powder keg down there. At least in Dallas, the Cowboy and the Cowboys quarterback and coach seem to get along. This is just a soap opera waiting to happen.
Yeah, that's true. And then the other one, something we speculated on, that's the Chicago Bears, what was going to happen with Jay Cutler. And, well, they gave Jay Cutler Tony Romo money. I think, I'm not going to call it Flacco money, because Flacco has won playoff games. He's won a Super Bowl. I'm going to call it Tony Romo money because Cutler has, in his 8 seasons, he has one playoff win, just like Tony Romo does. So I'm going to go ahead and say that he got Tony Romo money, because that's what that is. That's money on pure speculation.
Absolutely. That's a terrific analogy, and I think he's a Romo-like quarterback. On paper, he's got great numbers. When he's healthy, he always gives your team a shot to get into the playoffs. But A, can he get there? And B, when he does, can he win the big one? And we've yet to see that.
Yeah, that's true, and no one will ever forget when he tapped out against the Green Bay Packers in the playoffs, which was, it would have been fine had he tapped out and then the MRI revealed there was some damage, but it turns out the MRI reveals there's no damage to his knee, and, I don't know about Cutler. And plus, he didn't win this past weekend, and we know what happened the last time. Green Bay needed to win the final game against the Bears to get into the playoffs. Wound up with Aaron Rodgers putting on the championship belt.
Yep, and Rodgers, who was shaky. I mean, that was a beatable Packers team this past Sunday. He looked tentative and hesitant for the first half and threw a bad interception.
Hmm.
That's a game that the Bears can win. And ultimately, I know the defense need to make stops, and cornerback was playing zone instead of man, and Rodgers lit him up. But at the end of the day, you still have to outscore your opponent, and Cutler didn't ultimately do enough to get the Bears on top.
Yeah, well, and I think about the Bears, when you look at it from a discipline standpoint, though, there were 2 touchdowns, really. Getting beat on man coverage there at the end, but still, earlier in the game, when the ball is lying there on the ground, it's still a live ball, and finally, one of the Packers picks it up and just runs it into the end zone. So there's something about being present there. So maybe that element is missing from the Bears right now as well.
Yeah, that's completely inexcusable. That's something that's taught in Pop Warner. I mean, you keep playing till the whistle's blown, and in a game where a playoff berth's on the line, it's even more reprehensible. So I don't know if you blame the coach, you blame the players. I really don't know if they're yelling at them on the sidelines, but fairly comical to say the least.
All right, so you know what? We're going to have to go ahead and get into these. There's 4 big games this week, wild card weekend, so we have to pick these games real quick. Before we get into the playoffs, though, any final notes you'd like to give on this, what was a fantastic regular season finale of football?
I was really surprised that Joe Flacco did his best Andy Dalton impression. They had their chances to win, and he threw a number of interceptions at crucial times. I may be even more surprised that Andy Dalton did his own Andy Dalton impression and still managed to win the game. I mean, he threw an atrocious interception in the end zone when they could have put the game out of reach.
Well, he threw 4 picks in that game.
Yeah, and still won, which is unheard of. So if he plays like that, you could see another one and done in Cincinnati. And then the coaching carousel is very interesting in the NFL right now. I think Lovie Smith was a good hire by the Buccaneers. Everyone's raving about Bill O'Brien in Houston. To his credit, it got out of Penn State because I think he did a remarkable job there. But that's going to be a program that's going to take years, possibly even a decade to turn around. So I think he'll be pretty happy having the top pick. We'll see if Teddy Bridgewater ends up in Houston.
We shall see. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just get into it. Of course, the playoffs starting this weekend. 4 big games. We got the Chiefs and Colts. We got the Eagles and the Saints, the Chargers and the Bengals, and then the Niners and Green Bay, which, if you look at the last couple of seasons, that's turned into a pretty good rivalry there between Aaron Rodgers and Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah, they're always hard-fought games. Even you look at the opening game this season, it hopefully will again be a doozy.
Yep. Okay, so before we pick this week, I'll go ahead and give you your props. You were the regular season champion in the picks segment. I wound up 43 and 58. You wound up 50 and 51, just a game below 500. But you know what? It was a tough year with all the injuries, so I got to give you a due here, Mr. Lardieri, on a fine season. You whooped me fair and square.
Thank you. If you call being one game under 500 a whooping, I'll take it. But at the same time, I am no Denver Broncos. I have not won anything until the postseason's over.
Yep, that's true. So, you know what? That said, let's go ahead and get right into it. We'll take the games in order here. So the first game on Saturday, that's going to be at 4:35 Eastern Time. Kansas City Chiefs going into Indianapolis to play the Colts. The Chiefs, got off to that hot start, 9-0, and then, faltered down the stretch here a little bit. Whereas the Colts, they won the last 3 games here. When it looked like the midseason, Andrew Luck was a little bit shaky, but it looks like in the last month or so, Andrew Luck has started to come into his own a little bit. So what do you think? The Kansas City Chiefs, Indianapolis Colts. Colts are the division winner, so they have the home game. Both of them had identical 11-5 records. How would you see this game?
I'm going with the Colts. I don't like the way the Chiefs have been playing down the stretch, and then even watching the Chargers game, I think I was more impressed with the Chiefs' backups with the way they played. You take into account that Alex Smith and Jamal Charles and Dwayne Bowe, et cetera, and the defensive starters had a week off, and who knows, there might be some rust on there, but even if they haven't, Well, they started out 9-0 and ended up going 2-5 down the stretch.
Right.
I'm not impressed by that. That said, I like the way, like you had hit on, Lutz picked it up. The Colts are playing a little better. I think this game could potentially be low scoring, a close affair, back and forth. And in a game like that, I'm going to take Andrew Luck over Alex Smith. So I'm going with Indy.
Yeah, and then also remember Week 16, the Colts did beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead Stadium, 23-7. So there's that to look at as well. And like you said, I like the way that Andrew Luck is coming around too. I think that they just need to put more of the game in his hands. Go ahead and let Andrew Luck take that game over. I think the coaching staff may have been kind of coddling him just a little bit to try to manage him, get him to manage the games properly. But I think we're seeing Andrew Luck unleashed here in the past month or so. I'm going to go with the Colts too, so we're in agreement on that one.
Yeah, and you know what? I know we've mocked him numerous times throughout the season, but there have been a few Trent Richardson sightings. I wouldn't be surprised if...
I heard he got a touchdown last week. Is that true?
Yeah, so I mean, he's foreign territory to him. I don't know if he's been in the end zone since he scored against the 49ers in that upset, but who knows? He might get in the end zone and get in on the action again this week and make a difference.
That's true. And also for Richardson, I think if you're going to make a stand, if you're going to make a statement, now is the time to do it. You're on a team, you're on a playoff team. You're lucky as heck to get out of Cleveland. So now is the time. If Trent Richardson has got anything and is going to stick with the Colts, now is the time for him to go ahead and just, whatever he's been holding back, let it all out. And this weekend, don't leave any rounds in the chamber.
That's right. He wants to earn the title Mr. January.
Okay, so, and then the second game on Saturday, and this is, who knows, the inclement weather, of course, they're going to be playing outside. New Orleans Saints at 11-5, the Philadelphia Eagles at 10-6. Eagles, remember, the shaky start they had of the season, starting off 1-3, and everybody wondering, does Chip Kelly's offense translate over to the next level? But then you have the shakeup. Michael Vick gets injured. Nick Foles gets the chance to start, and what happens? Offense turns around. LaShawn McCoy leads the NFL in rushing with 1,607 yards. So they're really clicking on all 8 cylinders. Now the Saints, though, 11-5, but 8-0 at home, only 3-5 on the road. And I'll tell you something. I'll go ahead and pick this game. All due respect to Drew Brees, who threw for 5,000 yards for the 3rd straight season. But outdoors, inclement weather, against a red-hot, balanced Philadelphia Eagles team, I'm going with the Eagles all the way on this one.
I completely agree, and on a neutral site or even in the Superdome, I think it's a no-brainer and the Saints win. But you combine the fact that their outdoor record stinks, you look at the way the Seahawks worked them earlier in December, and then you add to that a winter storm coming through the Northeast, so all my friends and family on the East Coast, I feel your pain. I've lived through it before. I won't even tell you that I was wearing shorts after work today. But I digress. I really I don't like the Saints in the cold on a Saturday night at 8 p.m. and they thank NBC for that one. I think the Eagles are clicking. They're on a roll. Foles had a fantastic season. You add to that McCoy, and you can't key on anything. And that Rob Ryan defense has been slumping here in the last month. I think the Eagles win.
Yeah, and the Eagles, like we said, get off to that rough start. But looking at the Eagles, I think they've got the formula for I know it's a pass-happy league, but still, the teams that ultimately win championships, much like Baltimore did last year, balanced attack. They got the ground game. Then they can hit you through the air. So I like the Eagles, and they may be peaking at the right time. So I wouldn't be terribly surprised to see the Eagles maybe go a little further than everybody thinks they will.
Yeah, they could definitely be a sleeper team. And, it's funny, when Chip Kelly came in, everyone thought he was just going to be pass-happy, like you said, but a few astute observers said that LaShawn McCoy would be the biggest beneficiary, and kudos to them for right.
Yep, and I'll never get over that image of McCoy there with that championship belt that had been made for him that he would get as soon as he won the rushing title, and there he was doing interviews with that belt over his shoulder. That was a great moment.
Yeah, better than a discount double check.
Oh, you had to go there. All right.
I'm sorry.
Now, speaking of the Storms, here we got the San Diego Chargers in Cincinnati on Sunday. This will be the morning game or early afternoon game if you're on the East Coast. The Chargers at 9-7 going in to play the Bengals. Bengals at 11-5. And if you remember, it wasn't too long ago, the Chargers were 5-7 and left for dead in the AFC. Now you look at them, and the same thing as with the Eagles. You look at the balanced running. Ryan Matthews has somehow, amazingly, recently just figured it out. Phillip Rivers is playing well. The defense is playing well enough. They've scored plenty of points over the last few weeks. But going into Cincinnati, and you talk about Andy Dalton, he had gone 3 games without throwing an interception. Now he throws 4 picks against Baltimore. Could have been nerves, could have been the moment, could have been that it was just the law of averages. What do you think here? Chargers at the Bengals. Which way you going?
Every year in the wild card round, there's one road team that pulls the upset, and I think the Chargers are the team that can do it. They played once before this season, 17-10. That was pretty much the Chargers' last poor game of this season, and they rallied off of that. It was a game they could have easily won. Andy Dalton didn't put them away, and the Chargers' D kept them in the game for most of it. I think, you look at people who say, it's going to be cold in Cincinnati. They're bringing up the infamous 1982 AFC Championship game when it was, minus 40-degree wind chill,
59.
whatever it was.
Minus 59.
Okay, you got it. Yeah. And the river froze over. They probably shouldn't even have played the game. I think the Chargers will exorcise the demons of a Dan Fouts and his frozen beard, and they go into Cincy and take this game. And people may say to me, well, how can a team from Southern California win in the cold? And I point out to you, the Chargers beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead and the great and almighty Peyton Manning in Denver on a cold Thursday night, and I don't think that'll stop this team this year. You couple that with the way Andy Dalton's been playing down the stretch, atrocious last week. I just do not trust him in a big game. I'll take Phillip Rivers over him, even if it's on the road.
Yeah, that's true. And you know what? I tend to agree with you there. And I'd say, too, when they talk about teams playing in the cold, that Freezer Bowl game in 1981, that wasn't even cold. That's beyond. I mean, that's not even frozen tundra. It's beyond cold. I mean, minus 59 degrees? And that was after the team had played in 90-degree weather in Miami in probably the greatest playoff game ever the week before. So that's a temperature switch of 170 degrees for the human body? That's a lot.
Yeah, and they didn't have the technology to keep players warm like they did now. I mean, they probably wore thermals under those jerseys back in that day.
Well, you know what? For the reasons you just gave, and also, remember, Geno Atkins is still out for the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm going with the Chargers, too. And I think much like the Eagles, the Chargers are getting hot at the right time. And also, like I said about the Eagles as well, and especially in the fragile AFC, because all of those teams have some holes in their offense or defense and things that they need to shore up. This could be, if we look at it, and we look at the Chargers and how much they've underachieved in the past. They couldn't get there when they had LaDainian Tomlinson and Michael Turner and Darren Sproles and Antonio Gates when he was, a few years back, although he's playing well now. But Vincent Jackson, remember, high-powered. They couldn't make it. Maybe the Chargers just come out of the rise from the ashes, and it would be a most improbable run, but they could do it.
Hey, look at how many Giants teams went 9-7 and just happened to get hot at the right time in December. It's all about how you finish. I mean, those Giants teams by no means were dominant, or did anyone think they were going to make the playoffs at various points during those seasons. So, everyone likes a dark horse. It could be San Diego this year. It could be poised for a similar run. Yep,
that's true. And then let's get to the final game on Sunday. That's going to be the San Francisco 49ers in Green Bay to play the Packers. Niners finishing 12-4, Packers 8-7-1. Basically, percentage points, that's 500. What the heck? But, of course, Rodgers missing 7 games, it doesn't help that record at all. But when I look at this game, though, going back to last season, the playoffs when the Niners just ran through. In fact, Kaepernick by himself really beat the team. And then even the first game of this season, that was a game the Packers really wanted. And the Niners won that game as well. And also, the Packers are going to be without Clay Matthews there on the, as a linebacker. So, the Niners beat them there last year, and the Niners really seem to have their number. in fact, the Packers are having trouble selling out their playoff tickets for this game, and I wonder if the Packer fans are seeing the same thing that I'm thinking here, because I honestly don't see, even as great as Aaron Rodgers is, but I just don't see the Packers being able to stop the 49ers. I mean, the 49ers, I think, can go through the Packers anytime they want.
Yeah, I would love to agree with you. Normally I'd pick the 49ers. This is a team, unlike the Chargers, that I'm not sure how Colin Kaepernick's going to play in the cold, for instance. And you look back to week 1 of this season, it was really a great game. I know they're going to be missing Matthews, but at the same time, the Packers didn't have the running game that they've established now.
Yeah.
With Eddie Lacy and the reincarnation of James Starks. I think that's going to be the difference here. I think it's going to be brutally cold there. We will literally have the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field. And I think it'll probably be a close defensive struggle. But at the end of the day, I like the right arm of Aaron Rodgers in that cold up in Green Bay, whether the stands are sold out or not. And I think they eke out what the odds makers will say will be an upset. But I think the Packers exact some revenge. And who knows, they could be the NFC's version of the team that got hot at the right time.
Oh, really? Well, like we talked about in the open, when the Packers won the Super Bowl, and after the 2011 season, it was about them qualifying on the last day of the season. But I don't know. I just can't see that in Kaepernick. There's a certain familiarity, so he already knows what he can do there. He won in Green Bay last year, so I just think it's a comfort level with Kaepernick. And also you got Frank Gore, and then the defense of the Niners, I think, is a little more stout than the Packers. So that's a bold pick for you, I'd have to say, to go with the Packers here. But you might see something I don't see. I don't know, man.
I'm going out on a little bit of a limb and some intuition. I would pretty much, like the Chargers, a lot of people have written them off for dead. I think the same with the Packers and the world's new greatest backup quarterback. Were it not for Matt Flynn, with some credit, the Packers wouldn't even be here on Sunday.
Yep, and the Packers ended the season winning 3 of their last 4 games, but Rodgers had just come back for this, for this final game. So, hey, it should be fun. But yeah, I got the Niners in this game. They're looking as close to borderline unstoppable. Of course, you got Seattle to deal with next week, and the hot Eagles. We'll see if they make it. But this is what I love about playoff time, man. It's just it's fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. And as great as these matchups are next week, you look at regardless of how the games break, we're gonna have some really good ones next week for divisional weekend.
Yeah, and divisional weekend, they say, a lot of times produces the best games. I was always a fan of Championship Day because it's like 2 mini Super Bowls in the same day. But divisional weekend can be pretty fun too.
Yeah, I agree. And you look back last year, both those championship games were excellent. And pretty much, the Atlanta-San Francisco one came down to a final play, and the New England-Baltimore one too. It's close throughout most of the games, so let's hope for a repeat.
Yeah, and you know what? Let me talk about that before we go ahead and wrap things up. But we look at Atlanta and Tony Gonzalez retiring, having played his last game allegedly. I would like to see, and looking at the misfortune that was befallen Atlanta this year, but I'd like to see Tony Gonzalez and maybe do a Charles Haley type thing and come back about mid-season, join the team, and get on board there as they drove toward the playoffs, because it really wasn't fair what happened to Atlanta this year. I know a lot of teams are going to say, especially like the Steelers, when it comes to all the injuries that happened, because a lot of teams had them, but Atlanta just got taken down at every crucial position by injuries. I'd like to see Tony come back for half a season next year and see if he can get on a playoff run.
Yeah, it's a good idea, because then he could skip training camp too, which I'm sure he's probably not going to miss at all, whether he retirement or not. But yeah, and you look at it. I mean, other than Matt Ryan, the Falcons got hammered at every skill position they had. But I don't want to look forward to next year yet. But think about it: that they're going to have a nice draft pick and a heck of a lot easier schedule given their poor record.
Right.
And, in that division, look at what the Panthers did. Who knows? The Birds could be poised to rebound quickly, much like their bird neighbors to the north, Philadelphia, did, going from last to first.
Yep, there we go. All right. So remember, everybody, Follow Chris on Twitter, especially on game days when he's putting out a few choice nuggets of wisdom at Chris L Sports. Online, you can read him at chrislsports.blogspot.com. You can follow me on Twitter at The Inside Sports. So before we sign off here on NFL Football Talk, Chris, any final words for your adoring public out there?
Why, thank you. You referred to something that's near and dear to my heart. We have 4 playoff games this weekend, and as of right now, 3 of them are in jeopardy of being blacked out, including, which we think is blasphemy previously, Lambeau Field not being sold out. And a lot of people are saying, well, is it the weather? Is it this and that? Ultimately, let's face it, these playoff tickets cost a lot of money. You and I know what it's like to go to a regular season game, and the league and the owners only jack up the prices as the playoffs go further and further. I know they talked about Lambeau Field being expanded, but once upon a time it was impossible to get a ticket there. So
right.
I think the NFL should keep an eye on this. I think Philly's the only one that's got a guaranteed sellout. They got some extremely loyal fans there at the link, but I find this very interesting and a trend that I'm sure they're watching on Park Avenue in New York. They won't talk about it, but let's face it, if you've got the option of spending a couple $100 sitting out in the cold to watch a playoff game, or watching it at home in front of your HD TV, what would you do?
Yeah, I know. And then you have, that's what I've said, too, about sports, and with us not having a football team out here in Southern California, and everybody says we should have one, but there's so many things to do here. But still, when you look at the HD TVs, people don't get 50 and 60-inch TVs so they can not watch sports on it. So that's what the stadiums are competing with, too. And when you're looking at a few $100s, hey, you know what? That 50-inch TV, you can get those for around $500-600 now, which would be the price of a pair of playoff tickets. So, 50-inch TV or one game? Hey, I'm just saying.
No, it's true, and I've been to one Super Bowl in my life, and I'm glad I've been able to scratch that off my bucket list. But you look at what's going to happen in the Meadowlands. No tailgating. I mean, it's really becoming the no fun league with the Super Bowl. I mean, why would you spend thousands of dollars on a ticket? So you could basically go and sit in a stadium, in a cold one at that. The NFL's got some thinking to do in terms of marketing. I know they're the king of the crop right now in professional sports, but when I heard that, I was surprised, and just thinking about it a little more, not so surprised. I mean, just especially coming right after Christmas, are you going to fork out big bucks to go sit in a cold stadium when you could sit there in front of your fireplace? I probably wouldn't.
But when we look at it, and I don't mean any disrespect to the fans, but since when have Packer fans been that logical when it comes to supporting the Packers? I mean, they're out there no matter what the weather. Some of them out there in bikini tops, full of antifreeze, just cheering on their team. But all of a sudden, there's some type of critical mass that was hit this year, and they're not snapping up those tickets the way they used to. Interesting.
Yeah. And you would think, especially with Aaron Rodgers coming back, it's not like
right.
Matt Flint pull off the upset. They think, oh, we're one and done. I mean, they've got a fighter's chance. I mean, I know people think I'm crazy to pick them, but they're home and they've got Aaron Rodgers and they're in it. So yeah, it's really just the Green Bay one's a real head scratcher to me. I think it'll be interesting. I don't know. Maybe Brett Favre can come in and buy the remaining tickets and save the blackout. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Ocho Cinco said that he would do that in Cincinnati or something like that. I believe I read something like that online.
He did, and what I was wondering is where's he getting the money from? Because his reality show's over. It must, the NFL pensions are paying better than we thought.
All right, well, Chad Ocho Cinco will remain a mystery. He thinks he's going into the Hall of Fame, but anyways, that's a whole other show.
Well, he also thinks his ex-wife still loves him, but Carl Crawford snapped her up, and that's another sport and another show.
Chad Johnson's sloppy seconds. What a way to live. Anyways, all right. Well, before it gets really bad, let's go ahead and sign off here. So for Chris Lardieri, I'm Charles E. Smith, Jr. Thank you for watching. The show is Football Talk. This is, of course, an Inside Sports production, and we will see everybody next week for a prognostication on the divisional round. Thanks for joining us.